Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Wilder Ride Listeners Lounge, a podcast that developed outside of our regular podcast. Instead of watching a movie 1 minute at a time, this is a chance for us to invite a guest into our lounge and look at their life one moment at a time. I'm your host, I'm Alan Sanders.
I'm your co-host, Walt Murray.
Walt, this week, I don't know if I've even talked about this much in the last few weeks, but my father-in-law has been visiting us, and one of the things I realized with COVID, and if my father-in-law is in this situation, maybe there's a lot of other people now that things are opening up. We've been spending almost as much time not just hanging out, visiting, watching movies, but we've been taking him to the doctor for all the doctor's appointments that he just either couldn't get or chose not to do. And all of a sudden now, it's skin issues, it's back issues, it's spine issues, it's foot issues. I mean, we're trying to do I feel like we're on a medical tour of where we live.
Yeah, well, I heard the other day that there is a problem that people have neglected all kinds of things like colonoscopies and all kinds of stuff that they should have done during the pandemic and just didn't do it because they were afraid to go to the doctor or got lazy, didn't want to get out of their pajamas and just let stuff go.
Yeah. And then kind of dovetailing a little bit about what we chatted about last episode, now we're finding out half the stuff they told us all last year wasn't true. So now you got a bunch of people who are behind on their medicine, behind on their checkups or whatever treatments they were supposed to have. And I'll tell you, it's been kind of tough working him in because he's planning to be back at the end of the month up in his home in New York, way up in upstate New York. And we still have appointments that we're trying to get him through. So at least he'll have been going, because we're going to hope he'll have him back in the normal time around the holidays. But it's been wild. I've never had to really go through this.
Well, I was supposed to have an eye doctor appointment a few weeks ago, and it's a follow-up to some eye surgery that I'd had. And I was going through hay fever. And so I was coughing, and they said, "Hey, look, I've got hay fever. Here's the story." And she's like, "Oh, no, you can't come in. You've got to wait 2 weeks from today at least." And 2 weeks from the end of your cough, I was like,
2 weeks from the end of your cough.
I live in Georgia. I cough all the time. Like, I don't have anything. It's hay fever.
Look, watch, I can fake it.
Yeah, I know. So now I have to fake that I don't have allergies to go to the eye doctor.
Yeah, do you find yourself before things were getting to where we are today, but even a couple of months back, if you were in the store and you had to clear your throat, you would go, see, just clearing my throat.
Yeah, now everybody looks at you like you're a four-headed shark ready to attack.
I feel for the people that wouldn't go to their doctors, wouldn't go out and do their things, and it was really weird because even after all of the lifting of all of the masks and everything here in our state, we had one of the doctors, which is a private doctor, he could do what he wants. He's like, "Yeah, well, in the examination room, everyone still needs to be masked up." I said, "Wait a minute, you're a doctor, right?" And he goes, "Yeah." "I'm not sick, right?" "Yeah." You got your shots, right?" "Yeah." "Hey, my dad got his shots. My wife's not sick. I'm not sick. Why would we want to worry about this?" "Well, I'm just going to keep following these guidelines until I feel safe." Okay.
What guidelines? Nobody's given those guidelines anymore.
Yeah, no. But you know what? It's been inculcated in so many people. It just wasn't going to change. I
had to take my daughter to the emergency room, and I kept fiddling with my mask. I mean, this was a couple of months ago, and the nurse was finally like, "Just take it off. Don't worry about it. You're fine." Wow. So, but I'm just going to be happy when all this is over.
Yeah,
I think another couple of months or so, and all this will be just a bad memory.
Well, let's move on to something more pleasant. I mean, this past week, besides me playing,
this topic sucks.
Well, it is what it is. We got onto it only because of my father-in-law visiting and having to go back to the doctor. What about you? What have you? I know last week you said you're trying to play catch up with all the court cases and the workload. I heard you decided to create a sauna in your house to help with your stress and relaxation.
Yeah, because I didn't have enough on my plate. My air conditioner committed suicide. Um, so that was awesome. It was 96 degrees outside the day that happened. So I called for service, and the first person I could get out will be here next Monday.
Oh, wow. So it got pushed to next Monday.
Yeah, but I did get a call this afternoon that they're going to be out tomorrow. So
Oh, okay.
They got an opening, and so hopefully 4 o'clock tomorrow the AC truck will be in my driveway. But the good thing is I went out and bought 2 window units, and that has helped a lot. We already had one going, and not really how I wanted to spend my afternoon yesterday installing window units, but you do what you got to do in Georgia.
Hey, you know what? Those are lifesavers. We actually, the house we're in, the people that had it before my wife bought it, they had built up the unfinished areas of the downstairs. And instead of putting a second unit like you were supposed to, they just tapped into the original unit. And so it struggles during the heat of the summer. And so we actually use a couple of window units during the heat of the summer as supplement to help with that. And that is a lifesaver.
Oh, yeah, it is. You know, on kind of a different subject, something you just said reminded me of this. You've been in Georgia quite a while. Have you ever seen the house in, it may even be in Bartow, where they built a second floor to it, but the second floor that they built was the first floor?
Yeah. Yeah, that's Roselawn. That is it used to be the home of Sam Jones, the preacher that came and created a church down here. They built a house. It was a 1-story house. And after establishing himself and building his flock and collecting enough tithing, I suppose, over the years, decided they needed to expand and make a bigger ground floor. So they took and literally, this was in the late 1800s, raised the first floor and suspended it in the air while they built the new floor, which would become now the ground floor, and place what had been the first floor on top to make it now the second floor.
That is insane.
Yeah, that's Roselawn. You can come check it out. It is a museum you can not only tour, but twice a year the grounds are used for a local arts and crafts festival. They have the May Market in May, and then around Labor Day they have what they call is just the Roselawn Arts Festival. But then it's used for weddings, it's used for concerts, it's used for Easter egg hunts, and master gardeners take care of the lawn and all the flowers. It's a really cool place.
I don't know. Even though it's been standing that long and they've never had a problem, I don't know that I would trust a second floor that used to be the first floor.
Hey, people used to take pride in their work back then.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point. It's not some shoddy
There were
paste
not
together.
millennials were not on this task.
Okay, well then I guess that's fine.
We just lost all the millennials in our audience. Oh well.
Whoopsie. We had millennials.
Yeah. Hey, you hear these old Gen X farts talking about 80s and stuff? Yeah. Well, before we introduce our guest, which ironically, that makes a wonderful bridge to him. Anything else you got going on since the last time we chatted?
Well, I mean, I've got tons of stuff, but having the air conditioner die was definitely the most fun thing to talk about this week because it was so great.
You left me a voice message and said, in the next couple of weeks, we got to figure out how to get out on the boat and just, I love what you said. We could do a little fishing, maybe a little drinking, or maybe we'll just do a little drinking. And I'm like, you know what? All of the above. I'm fine. You know what? That
was my mood at the moment.
Every military test I ever took, every time there was an all of the above, that was always the answer. So just go.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, you know what? We're going to go ahead and get going here. We've got a guest that's been waiting in the green room, and we don't want to keep him back there. We want to bring him out here for all of you. We mentioned Gen X culture, the 80s, but, you know, a lot of us Gen Xers are still paying attention to movies and stuff coming out today, the music of today, the podcast, and so it's not fair to say just because you're a Gen Xer and actually have a concept of history and context and culture that you don't understand today's current, entertainment, because we do. And so I'm going to bring on a guy who knows a whole lot because he watches, I think, everything that's ever been streamed on every platform that's ever existed. Folks, put your hands together for our guest, Jeff Leiboff. Jeff, welcome.
Hey, good to see you guys.
All right. Well, first and foremost, if that name's familiar, we've mentioned him with the names of the other folks from Radio Labyrinth, which is a culture-based podcast. But before we get into that, which we will get to, we've had Tim Andrews on before. We've had Stephanie Swain. We finally get you. I want to go all the way back to, because you've got a graphic design background, but before that, you and Tim are lifelong schoolmates. Tell us a little bit about when you and Tim first realized you were about to grow up together, corrupting the world.
I think Tim moved to our town. His parents split up, and I think his mom moved to Mansfield, which is where I'm from, and when I was in 4th grade. So Tim just kind of showed up maybe the first day of 4th grade, and we just became fast friends. 4th grade was like my worst year of school, my entire school career.
Well, yeah, you met Tim.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you met Tim, that makes sense.
You were his fall guy, right?
It all comes together.
I had a teacher that I hated.
Oh.
Who literally spelled things wrong on a spelling test, and I corrected her, and I was right, and she was wrong, and I got in trouble.
Oh, one of those kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what's so funny? It reminds me of a story. When I first moved from Detroit to down here, I found myself in a lit class, and I was like, I had all of this like a year ago. Why am I doing this again? And the teacher goes, just do it. I'm like, okay, fine. So I would run through everything because I already knew what I was doing. And then I would kick back in an English class, open up a book and start reading. And she's like, what are you doing? Well, I'm reading. Well, you're supposed to be working. Well, I finished. Well, I don't want you reading in my class. I'm like, it is an English class, right? Yeah, I promptly got a note sent home about my attitude.
Oh, I had a few of those.
Yeah, I got a bunch of those.
That must be why we all get along together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So through, you probably didn't know, because nobody really knows at the beginning, but you and Tim really have known each other now for almost 40, well, I guess about 40 years.
Yeah.
That's crazy, isn't it? When you look back.
It is. And we have another friend, our friend Stu, who used to live here in Atlanta, but now he lives in Florida. Stu and I went to kindergarten together. So he and I have been friends even longer than Tim.
That's nuts. I mean, I've got a lifelong friend from 8th grade, but that's the only one. Everyone else I've either lost touch with or has never been wanting to reconnect. And so it's kind of weird that you've got two. You're double me. Walt, what about you? You got anybody that you can remember all the way back from grade school or maybe middle school that you just are still lifelong friends with?
Yeah, there are actually a couple. And really thanks to Facebook a lot. I lived in a town called Westerville, Ohio when I was a kid. And I stayed in touch with Matt Cretion and Mike Cretion. Their dad was actually my dad's FBI partner. And stayed in touch with them. Mark James, I've stayed in touch with a little bit, a couple other folks.
Wow. Stayed in touch with, you mean you have surveillance running and
exactly
tapped all their phones.
Exactly. Well, and Matt is in a couple of bands up in Columbus, Ohio now. And one of them, they do Grateful Dead covers, and another one, they just do general covers. So it's kind of cool to be able to see what they're doing. And Matt does end up on, Facebook video feeds every once in a while playing drums. And so it's kind of cool to keep up with people. But I moved when the last day of 4th grade, we moved to Atlanta. So it's kind of a weird thing. You weren't able to really stay in touch for that gap time until later on when the internet came along and helped us rekindle those relationships.
Remember those years when the internet and especially social media was like really cool because you could just reconnect with people and share your vacations and your pets and your wife or husband and whatever. It's not like that anymore, is it?
No, now you get to share your anger.
I guess there's still a little piece, but it is kind of sad because I rekindled a lot of relationships from, I'll say, late high school and certainly college and work, thanks to social media. I have yet to find anybody from my elementary years that I'm still in touch with. There's not a single person. It took 8th grade is this far back as mine goes, which is kind of wild because it was 2 years after I met him. I ended up moving down from Detroit to Atlanta. Talk about culture shock.
Wow. That's crazy.
So
I'm Facebook friends with just about everyone from my high school class, at least the ones that are willing to go on Facebook. There's still a bunch of them up there that are like, no, I refuse.
Yeah, I think Walt, you and I are the same way because of our reunions and stuff. That really helped. I think all the folks that were used to be the class presidents or whoever's supposed to be responsible, because I just ended up going to my 30th? Not that long ago? That was crazy.
Yeah, we're working on my 35th right now.
Ugh. I don't like that. I don't like it because the number keeps going up.
Hey, I'm good. As long as the number keeps going up.
As long as the number doesn't stop. Because if it
when
pauses,
the number stops, we got a problem.
Hey, bee! Do you ever hear like that Richard Pryor when he wakes up in his hotel room and he hears, because he was talking about the machine going, doo, doo, doo. He goes, I woke up one day and it was going, doo. He goes, ah! Doo, doo, doo. Shocked himself back into life. So, Jeff, let's move forward with you because I want to keep it about you, even though we're having a lot of fun all kind of reminiscing. At what point, because I know you're a graphic designer today, but what did you think your career path was going to be, especially with Tim as an influence on your life?
When we got to college, we both started at the same time at Mansfield University, which is in the town I grew up in. And there's not like specialty for graphic design or anything like that. So we all decided to just do mass communication, which is the general degree that you get from Mansfield University. And Tim did his stuff with the radio station, and I did my stuff with the college newspaper.
Okay, so you went more on sort of like the journalism track, and he was more broadcast.
I was thinking I was going to be a journalist when I started college, and I started working on the newspaper, and I found that I liked putting the newspaper together and doing the artwork more than the writing.
So it's something you sort of discovered thanks to college, that there was an element that you weren't aware of ahead of time, but thanks to being exposed to it, the creation of the layout, the creativity, the graphics, the design really started to grab your attention.
I did take 2 years of graphics in high school, but that was pre-computer. So it was all the old-fashioned, like setting type with the little metal blocks of type and cutting stuff, like taking photography of things and making film and negatives and then stripping the negatives.
Yeah, I remember that very well. I was on the college newspaper, and sometime early on when I got there, late 80s, they bought Macs.
Yeah.
And it was like totally mind-blowing.
Photoshop 1.0.
Yeah.
They had Macintoshes when I got to college, and that was how I learned. Like the most computer graphic training I ever had, the editor of the Flashlight, which was the newspaper, sat me down and gave me like a 20-minute crash course in how things worked on the Mac. And that was all the computer graphic design training I had.
Oh my gosh.
Everything else has been self-taught. I taught myself how to do Photoshop and Illustrator and all the Adobe programs.
You know what's crazy is sometimes you just have a knack for stuff like that. I know I've had to learn Photoshop for what I've done in my different career paths, and it's just one of those things I've been fascinated by. And you're right. Sometimes you just learn by doing, or you ask somebody, hey, how do I do this? Or how do I create a mask? Or how do I replace this? And then, but you end up being a lot better with the software, because now I know, like in my head, I know all the shortcuts. I know how to do it. And then my wife is all of a sudden just now getting into Photoshop for some design work she's doing. And I go too fast. I have to learn to slow myself down because I've learned so much over the years.
Right. And when you teach yourself these things, it's hard to teach somebody else because nobody ever taught you.
Right. Right.
And somebody wants you to teach them, and you're like, just figure it out on your own. That's what I did.
No one taught me. Is that when the curmudgeon starts to fit into our age? Is that when we start saying, get out of here? So. Get off my lawn.
Back in my day, we didn't have friends who showed us things.
In my day, we did manual typeset and took negatives and pictures. Like, oh, dear Lord, I'm just walking out of the room. So, Jeff, as you progressed, has that been your career path out of college, is really graphic design? I mean, where did you go?
When I graduated, I had two jobs. I was writing journalistic stories for the Williamsport Sun Gazette, which is a newspaper in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, which is the home of the Little League World Series.
Hey,
you're familiar with that?
Yeah.
And then some of my friends who had graduated a year or two ahead of me in college started their own weekly newspaper. And so I started working for them, and I was doing more, putting the paper together, doing the design side. And then I was writing a little bit for them, but not a lot.
So as you started to grow as a more of a layout person, a copy person, looking at how it should all kind of flow, where did that naturally take you? Did you find yourself moving more toward only graphics and less writing?
Yeah, well, I was writing a story for the Williamsport Sun-Gazette. I can't remember what the issue was exactly, but some people were going on strike. And I wanted to give the side of the story of because as a journalist, you got to report both sides of the story. Just tell everybody what's going on.
Well, not today. Apparently that's optional, but okay.
Right.
But I called up some of these strikers and I was like, tell me what your issues are.
Mhm.
And they're like, I'm not talking to you. And they were like mad at me. And I'm like sitting there going, I'm trying to help you
Right.
get your side of the story in the newspaper, which everyone's going to see. And they were just mad at me for asking questions. And I was like, that's it. I'm done. So
how dare you
when
question why we're on strike? I don't have to talk to you. We're the press.
That's when I stopped writing.
So you're like, screw it. At that point, you're done.
Just if people are going to be just put, shoot themselves in the foot. I don't want to be part of that.
All right. So you started to make that move away then from the writing, the journalism to more of the design.
I did a little sports still because I liked covering like high school football and stuff like that. But I stopped writing like journalistic stories after that. But
it became more sports and feature.
More towards, yeah.
So where did you see your career then take that next leap? Because I'm trying to get sort of a background of who you are before you and Tim kind of cross paths again in radio. You got yourself in trouble with one radio station. I want to get into that in a little bit, but when did you kind of decide where your career path was definitely going?
Well, I kind of monkeyed around on the radio station while Tim was there, and Tim had worked his way up to be one of the big wigs at the college radio station. But I was on the newspaper most of the time, so I had a very irregular schedule, and I would try and do like a radio show like at 4:00 in the morning when I got done laying out the newspaper when nobody was on the air. I would just go in and play some records and stuff. But after college and working for a couple of years for both newspapers, I left the Williamsport Sun-Gazette and just stayed with my friends who were doing their own newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got an offer for a job on a Caribbean island.
Oh, hey.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice.
And it was all layout and design, no reporting or anything. So I thought, who doesn't want to live on a Caribbean island, at least for a year, I ended up staying there 2 years.
I was going to say, this had to be in your maybe mid-20s. I mean, why wouldn't you move to a Caribbean island?
Right.
Yeah, no kidding.
So the island's called Tortola. It's one of the British Virgin Islands, the capital of the British Virgin Islands. About a 30-minute boat ride from St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands. A little closer to St. John, if you're familiar with that one.
Yeah, didn't they have a volcano go up just recently?
I think that was maybe Montserrat.
Now I'm getting my headlines mixed up. Wasn't there an unexpected volcanic eruption all of a sudden in one of it was Saint something?
I didn't hear about that. That's possible.
But
it was Saint Volcano Island.
It was not Saint Volcano Island.
Well, Jeff, usually when you hear about somebody getting a job offer on a Caribbean island, it doesn't involve graphic design. It usually involves like hiding money or transporting things.
This was a newspaper called the BVI Beacon, which is still running today. It's like the premier newspaper of the British Virgin Islands.
Wow. I just looked it up. It was actually St. Vincent, just so that way people don't think we're stupid. It was, I don't know how close that was to you, but it was St. Vincent Island that just recently happened.
We worked with a guy from St. Vincent at the newspaper. He was like the handyman and the guy that would take the papers around and drop them off at all the places, like the big bundles of newspapers. He would take them in this little truck and drive them around and drop them off.
All right, so you're there for 2 years. Why in the world did you leave?
Well, 2 years and 5 hurricanes later.
Oh, okay.
Oh, gosh.
I'm getting the rest of the story.
Yeah.
And it got kind of old after a while. I mean, at the time I lived there were no fast food restaurants. There was one supermarket and there was one movie theater that showed one movie for like 3 months at a time.
Ugh.
And everything had to be shipped in. So everything was like super expensive and I was making zero money. So all the people that worked for this newspaper, and we became friends with all these other young people who were like dive instructors or people that worked for charter boats. And we would all go around to the various happy hours after work and so we could eat.
Dollar wings, right?
Yeah. And
you were just building good good relationships with the community
and survival
there
skills.
there were times when my roommate and I would joke about how I would slave for weeks at a time to get this newspaper out, and then he would use that newspaper as toilet paper.
Wow. Well, so after 2 years, you decided that's it, time to come back to the States?
Yeah, I mean, it just 2 years seemed like enough. And I thought to myself, I could stay here. I could try and get another job or keep this job or look around. Because there's a lot of people that do that. They go there and they get their job and they work their contract or whatever. And then they find some other work there and just stay forever, which was a distinct possibility. I really thought about maybe becoming a scuba dive master and working for one of these scuba dive companies, because I did a lot of scuba diving while I was down there.
Got to tell you, the wife and I did some scuba diving in Mexico and then again around Roatan. And I could very easily, now that we're empty nesters, see ourselves sinking our next investment into becoming dive certified to that level. And then I wouldn't mind living on an island. Honestly, at this point in my life, I've lived through all the other crap. Now, see, if somebody offered me what you had in your 20s, if they offered it to me now, I'm like, oh yeah, we can retire on an island. Yeah, I'll do it.
There are a lot of people that do that. And so I thought to myself, I'm either going to stay here forever or I'm going to go back and get back into the rat race back in the States. And that eventually won out.
Now, did you have to look for a job first, or did you kind of move back with friends or family?
I moved back in with my parents, and I got a job pretty quickly in Elmira, which is where Tim lived before he moved to Mansfield. And I was working for a company called Artistic Greeting. They had like a sort of a partnership relation with American Greetings, the greeting card company.
Yeah, I was jokingly going to say, what were you doing? Greeting cards?
That's I was.
We did do greeting cards, and we did like personalized labels and checks and all kinds of stuff like that. So I was doing
cool,
all sorts of graphic design for them. I worked on their catalog for half the year, and then we designed products for the other half the year.
Okay, so Jeff, when you're going through school and thinking, I'm going to design, I'm going to do this, did you picture yourself being in a more boring job than designing checks and greeting cards?
I had fun doing it because we could really use our imaginations, and we had different licenses. We could do stuff with Garfield. And
well, at least that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I had fun doing it. It was kind of a boring job, but I worked there for a few years until they sold the company. And then I was planning on coming to Atlanta to visit Tim for vacation. And like 2 weeks.
So while you were there, Tim had he had relocated to Atlanta at that point?
Down here in 96 when the Olympics came.
Uh-huh.
And so this would have been 98 was when I moved down here.
Gotcha.
So the company that I worked for got sold to a company out in Colorado 2 weeks before my vacation. And so when my vacation was supposed to start, they said, well, you can get a job, they'll offer you a job to move to Colorado, which maybe I would have if it was today. But back then I was like, nah, I don't think I'm going to go to Colorado. And I'm supposed to go to Atlanta for vacation. So I'm just going to go and see what happens. I got down here and Tim was like, just move here, dude.
Mm-hmm. So where did you end up landing in Atlanta when you finally decided to relocate in 98?
Tim had a 1-bedroom apartment in Sandy Springs. And so I crashed on his couch until we could afford to move into a 2-bedroom place, also in Sandy Springs. But yeah, I came here, enjoyed 2 weeks. Our friend Stuart also lived here at that time. So I came to Atlanta. I got a job pretty quick down in Hapeville at a printing company that printed all that crap that you take out of the Sunday paper and throw away before you read it.
What's all this filler material? I thought there was a lot of news. It all came falling out.
Yeah, I wondered who was responsible for that.
They printed all that stuff, and they printed the Sunday funnies, which was the part I enjoyed.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, and for folks who are young enough that they've never really gotten a Sunday paper, I always knew what day it was by how loud the Sunday paper was hitting my apartment front porch, because it sounded like a sack of concrete. The rest of the week, you wouldn't hear the paper because it was so light. Right. The Sunday paper always had all that crap in it.
It was also the had all the feature stories for the weekend. I remember I used to use the paper as movie reviews, what theaters were showing, what movies. I always used to look at that segment all the time. Had the, in-depth sports, and it had the TV guide kind of listings for what to watch for the coming week. So I didn't even know I was an arts and entertainment person, but I knew I would read the comics, and I would check the arts and entertainment. Those were the two things I always wanted to look at.
You didn't want to look at the Piggly Wiggly ad for the week?
No, I wasn't really, no. Now, you know what's sad? Now I'm the exact opposite. Now I'm like, what's on sale this week? Oh, look, honey, we're having baby back ribs because they're on sale, So, but
beans 32 cents.
Oh my, 3 for $1. Well, let's saddle up. We're heading out. No, we really are. My wife and I are big into the not just coupon shopping, but we try to stretch our dollar because we're not into just throwing money away. And we will we literally now, thanks to the internet, we get the internet version of the circular the day it comes out, and we'll go through it, sit down together and say, okay, based on what's on sale, we actually chart out 7 days ahead. What are we going to make for dinner? We really seems kind of boring, but you know what? It makes it kind of easy to go through the week. I don't have to worry about what to make for dinner every night. We already have it thought out.
Well, and that does kind of lead me to a question for Jeff. How have you seen that whole graphic world change over the years as people have migrated off of like the newspaper?
Yeah, well, the newspaper business is pretty much dead. I mean, they still sell Sunday papers to a lot of people, but they consolidated all the printing of the newspaper, at least the inserts, into one hub down in Dallas. So the company I was working for sent all their work to Dallas, and they sent us down there for 2 weeks, basically for training. And what I didn't realize at the time was that I was going to be training all the people in Dallas how to do my job, and rather than them teaching me anything about the software or the program.
Yeah, that's not a good omen.
So I went down to Dallas for 2 weeks and showed them how to do all of our work, and then all of our work went away.
Well, now that we know how to do it, we don't need you anymore, right?
Yeah. So they offered me a job in Dallas, but then at that point I didn't want to move to Dallas, so I just decided I'm going to stay here. And that was when the printing industry was still pretty big, at least for paper printing, which it's not so much anymore. But I found another job pretty quick. And the company I worked for, within 2 months, they decided to close their design office and consolidate it with their printing office, or their printing warehouse, which happened to be in Villa Rica.
Oh, yes.
So rather than living 5 minutes from work and being able to, I live on South Cobb Drive, and I would go to South Atlanta Road for my job. Rather than do that, I would drive an hour out to Villa Rica every day. And that was when I started getting into podcasts.
Listening to them in the car, huh?
Right. Yeah, I had a 2-hour commute round trip. So
yeah, on I-20, which is an interstate with no entertainment.
Right.
That is a boring ride.
So that was around the same time that like Ricky Gervais came out with the podcast. And just like the early days of podcasting.
That was before anybody even knew what a podcast even was.
Right.
I know a lot of people think pod means it was from the iPod, but it wasn't.
Right.
It stood for play on demand. It was just,
right.
Hey, it's a radio show you can listen to whenever you want.
I was always a Mac guy, being in the design world, so I had the iPods and the first iPhone I had and all that. So when podcasting started, it was pretty big on, at least for Apple people.
All right, before we get into the podcasting side, because I do listen to Radio Labyrinth and I do pick up on some of your stories. You got let go from a radio station one time that Tim was sort of a supervisor or somebody, because
this was the college radio station.
Oh, it was? Okay.
Yeah. And I did have a regular show at that point, which was just a once a week 2-hour radio show or whatever. But we were visiting another show that was like a late night Grateful Dead kind of music.
And being Grateful Dead music, you figure you got to do what Grateful Dead listeners and people in the audience like to do.
We don't normally do, but we had another friend from a town 12 miles over visit the station that night, and they had some, I don't know how you want to say it on your program.
They had some
they were smoking
what is
weed.
medicinal now in Colorado.
Right. Maybe the reason I probably would have moved to Colorado today.
You're smoking the ganja.
So yeah, we smoked this marijuana, and I had been in college for a couple of years at that point, and I've had experience with it, but this stuff was like on a different level. And so the radio show like went from reasonably professional level to what the hell are these people doing in the studio? The general manager of the station heard it and came rushing in and shut us down, kicked all of us off the air.
Oh, brother.
Banned us from the radio station.
I see a Cheech and Chong moment where the manager comes in and the whole studio is a cloud of smoke. You can't even see the people behind the glass. Opens the door, comes spilling out.
He came in and he goes, "I don't like the smell in here, guys."
It's a radio station and we're playing Grateful Dead music. What do you expect?
And
it's a college station. It's not like it's even a professional, real radio station. But I guess they had to comply by FCC rules, and apparently that was some kind of big no-no.
On the flip side, knowing it was a college station that was sort of like a proving ground, you guys must have been really engaging to get fired from that.
It wasn't even my show. That's the thing. I was visiting another show, but
you were just hanging out.
Why do I have to get kicked off my show?
Oh my God, that is awesome. You talk about having like some strong stuff, and that's the crazy thing about not knowing where your stuff's coming from. There's times where you're thinking, gosh, I don't feel anything, and other times you're like, I swear my face is numb.
This was
not that I would know for my kids who listen. I just heard it.
You took a little puff, and then went to pass it to the person, and as my hand went from my mouth to pass it to the person, everything was like in slow motion. It was like, and I knew I was in trouble at that point.
Uh-oh. Yeah, those are the people who they stop their car driving home saying, I'm fine to drive. And they're like 300 feet before the stop sign. Like, what are you doing? What is a stop sign? Yeah, up there.
Yeah, I went to a Grateful Dead show at the Omni in Atlanta in the early 90s. And I wasn't at all into any of that at the time, any of the, smoking weed or anything. But just from secondhand smoke, we were pretty baked.
Feeling good.
And I remember driving up 75 and I was like white knuckling the steering wheel and like, why is everybody driving so freaking crazy? My buddy goes, you're driving 22 miles an hour.
Yeah. You know what? You come to realize cruise control has another purpose. It'll keep me at the speed limit. I don't have to think about it.
Oh, if I was driving the speed limit, I would have been freaking out. Why am I on a rocket ship? We had to stop and eat at
Why
Waffle
are we
House.
going so fast? Calm down. The song's not even over. Yeah, now you go to Colorado, nobody does that anymore. They just go to the store and buy some gummies and just chew, and then you're gone, an hour and a half later.
Yeah. Tim was one of the assistant managers of the radio station or whatever. He was like the second guy down from the guy that fired us.
Uh-huh.
So he went to bat for us and said, hey, don't kick him off the air permanently. But it was a moot point at that point. He tried to save our shows, but he couldn't do it.
Well, that was nice. But I mean, obviously you guys did it right. You got in there and you got out of there. All right. Well, now that we're caught back up, I wanted to hit that story because when you were telling it and I wasn't getting all the details, but I was laughing my butt off on that. It was a few weeks back on Radio Labyrinth before Tim took his paternity leave.
Yeah.
By the way, for folks who are listening that are on the Radio Labyrinth, Tim had his baby a couple weeks back from the recording of this, and he is giddy. I texted him a couple times just a couple days ago, and he said, this is the most amazing thing. I just stare at Gil. Like, I just stare at him. I'm just like, oh my God, this is ours. And I think that's cool. That's that sense that he understands the baby changes everything.
Oh yeah.
And they had kind of a hard go at it trying to get pregnant in the first place. They've been working on it for a couple of years. So
yeah, a long time. We talked about that the last time he was on, and it took, and I'm so happy for them because I know how hard they wanted to have a child, and that's really, really cool. So let's fast forward. We were talking about podcasting. When and whose idea was it? Because I know Tim was in radio, but he was doing more like voices and bits and parts, and he ended up bouncing around from place to place. And we don't have to go into Tim's career. We already can go to an older episode of this show to find him. For you, when did the idea of creating a podcast come up between you and Tim?
Well, when I was listening to all those podcasts on my way to work out in Villa Rica, I thought Tim and I should do one of these podcasts.
Uh-huh.
So I started talking to Tim. I was like, Tim, we got to do one of these podcasts. And he didn't know what a podcast was at the time. And it wasn't what it is today for sure. But I figured I'd put the bug in his ear or whatever about it. And then, I kept bugging him for years and years. And eventually our friend Ira Malkin said, hey, Tim, I got all this studio space and I got, my wife works at this place where we can set up our recording equipment and let's do a podcast. And Tim said, well, my buddy Jeff has been wanting to do a podcast with me forever. So we had a meeting, me, Tim, and our buddy Ira Malkin, who is in a band called the Vipers, if you're ever around Atlanta. Want to see them play. They're a blues band. They just played their first gig since the pandemic a couple weeks ago, and it was fantastic. So we met at a restaurant, and we just started throwing ideas around. And Tim said, let's call it Radio Labyrinth, because then we can just go down whatever path we want to go down and go all over the place. And he's like, it'll be like going on a YouTube rabbit hole kind of thing where you just go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. I said, that sounds cool. So let's do that.
Awesome. So do you remember the year that Radio Labyrinth officially aired its first episode?
2015.
In 2015. So
in December of 2015.
All right. So how was it? Because I know with FCC, you're always on guard to what to say, how to say it. You're being very careful. But with a podcast, it's wide open, especially from like your perspective and Tim's, having been in radio, or at least college radio, and him in radio. Was it a weird shift to make that move into a podcast?
For me, no. For Tim, I think he liked having that outlet where he could say whatever he want and do whatever he want, because the confines of radio are like shackles for a guy like Tim who can just go off, and so it was. I thought it was great opportunity for him to cast off the shackles of the FCC and just do what he wanted to. And then eventually he got fired, so he had a non-compete and had to wait several months to get hired for another job. And so he threw himself wholeheartedly into doing this podcast, and that was like his outlet for a long time. So it took off from there.
The focus a lot on your podcast is pop culture and what's going on in that world. What drove you to that angle on it? What drove you to the pop culture genre?
Well, I'm a TV guy. I always watch a bunch of TV shows and try and stay up with what latest streaming thing is, or what's going on HBO Max this week, or what's coming out. And so when Tim and I would get together, our conversations would always just be like, what are you watching? Because Tim would, if it was up to Tim, he would just watch The Sopranos over and over and over and over again.
The only show.
And he has probably like 50 times. So he would ask me what I'm watching, and that was our conversations that we would have whenever we would see each other. We would just talk about what shows I'm watching, what's going on, what movies I want to see. And Tim would like turn me on to what music he was listening to, because I don't hear new bands at all ever. But Tim being in radio, he had he had his ear to what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And that's just like how our conversations were off the podcast. So we decided to keep doing that on the podcast. And
I think that's one of the things I really like about your podcast is that it is a very natural flow between the three of you.
Yeah.
Or four or two, or however many are there that week.
When we do it off the air, it's more confrontational. Like I'm giving Tim crap and making fun of him for not knowing what these shows are and stuff. And it kind of gets nicer on the podcast where we just like have discussions and stuff. And Tim was always like, you got to do it like we're not even on the air and where you're mean to me and stuff. And I'm like, I don't know. It doesn't come naturally to me while we're recording to be like that. But in person, we break balls, so to speak.
But you know what? There is something that's good about that, knowing that you're being recorded, because I think that's what brings that next level. I mean, there's obviously anybody can do a podcast today. I mean, a lot of people put out shows. Some only last a couple dozen episodes, maybe some last a year, and they realize how much work. But when you go that next level where you realize we're trying to put out a listenable product and we want to grow the audience.
Right.
I think that's a natural kind of way of looking at it. I mean, if Walt and I recorded ourselves without knowing that we were being recorded, we wouldn't have a show.
Right. Talk about a show about nothing.
So I think that's, now let me ask you this, because I've watched your show sort of evolve since I discovered you, and I discovered you solely because you found us. Like, you found our show, and I was like, who's this? Wait, what? And we ended up being invited to come out and talk about what we were doing. But you've kind of evolved. You were doing some the pop culture news. Then it kind of became more about getting some guests. Then the guests went away. Then the guests came back, and now it's kind of evolved as well, sort of just based on the time frame.
I like interviewing people and speaking to people that I like and doing content that amuses me.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times it'll be some of the other people aren't really into it, and you can tell, but they're professional enough. But if there's a celebrity or something like W. Brown from Deadwood has been on our show a couple times.
Yeah.
If there's somebody that I can reach out to and say, hey, come on our show, and we have at least a little bit of clout in the podcasting community. So
see,
I try and take advantage of that.
Secretly, I hear these guests and I'm like, I got to get Jeff to be a producer for our show, because it's so hard sometimes to convince people to come onto the show, because I guess they get asked a lot, or they're not sure. They don't want to make sure they're on the wrong show nowadays. You don't want to be, oh my God, I was on an episode, but 3 episodes back, they said this, and I'm totally against that, and I don't need to get canceled. And so how do you, because I think Tim leans on you a lot for those guest invites.
Yeah, I do. I think my main job on the Radio Labyrinth podcast is producer. I'm also a co-host, and I try and do my best as best I can on that part of the job. But I think I'm more a producer of the podcast.
Yeah. I mean, you're definitely bringing the content, especially when it comes to guests and topics and all the stuff that you watch, which is a pretty good portion of every closing of the episodes that I've listened to, is that whole, what have you been watching? What would you recommend or not recommend? And that kind of was an influence for our show. I thought, you know what? The audience probably wants to know, well, what should I watch? What are you guys watching? So I thought that was a cool idea.
Yeah. And you guys are doing a great job of it.
Well,
I wouldn't necessarily make myself or make Tim watch these terrible movies that you're making Walt watch. But
in fairness, this was Walt's idea.
Yeah. So next year we're gonna let Alan choose something for him to do that's painful, like maybe a surgery or.
I could take over next year just for fun to flip flop the horrible movie watching, but every one of my reviews would be the same. What the hell is wrong with people?
And where are you finding these movies? Because are these like some low tier streaming service that?
No,
these are all on Amazon Prime. Every one of them so far has been on Amazon Prime. Here's the crazy thing, Jeff. Well, you know how this works better than I do. So if you watch, Rocky, every suggestion that comes up for the next week on Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever is going to be, a boxing documentary or Rocky 2 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I do kind of like some crappy B movies. And so I had watched a couple of, I think I watched like Plan 9 from Outer Space, and I watched some other more modern bad movie. Well, all of a sudden, these really terrible movies start popping up as suggestions. And I think I watched Llamapocalypse or something. And I was like, you know what? I really, it's not that good, but it was at least kind of funny and worth looking at. So I thought, this would be kind of a fun bit to do on the show this year. Well, little did I know that Llamapocalypse was one of the best of the lot. And these others have been, and since we're a podcast and Alan will have to edit this, some of this bullshit that they've got out there is a bunch of fucking nightmares that I start watching. Like, what in the hell is this shit that I'm watching? And I want to kill myself. And I'm like, so I'm kind of learning to be a little bit more selective in the crap balls that I'm watching. But
it's like they come up with the name first, and they go, "Oh, this is a great name. Let's make this movie."
Yes. And what I'm also realizing is some common threads in writers, producers, and actors.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're an actor and you're caught in the Planet of the Sharks nexus, go find something else to do. But I'm guessing that these writers and producers are actually making a living doing this. So it's kind of now intriguing me of like, how do you do Llama Apocalypse and then do Planet of the Sharks and then do, Attack of the Killer Donuts and make a living doing that? It's really mind blowing.
If Amazon's buying them, yeah, they'll keep churning them out, I guess.
Well, that's the thing. And some of them are for rent. I'm like,
okay,
who's paying to rent these? I try to avoid the ones that are for rent because I really don't want to spend any money. But, when you look at, there's this one guy, the guy who wrote the one that we're doing today, he has not done a movie anybody's ever heard of. Like one of his movies is called In the Name of Ben-Hur. Nobody's ever heard of that.
I've heard of Ben-Hur.
And yet somebody paid him to make that piece of garbage.
We assume.
Right?
There's a whole podcast out there called How Did This Get Made?
Yes.
That it goes into this exact topic of how the hell did this movie get made?
Yeah, and that is a great podcast. I do love that one. And the two of the people on that one are guys from the show The League.
Yeah.
And so they're great comedians and they do a great job with it. But yeah, you go through the list of the movies that they've done and you're like, somehow somebody has taken the filter off at some of these studios and they're not reading scripts or something because some of these movies are absolutely horrible.
Well, remember, we talked with Amanda Raymond, the up-and-coming director, and, we said, and I made that comment, it takes every bit as much work to make a shitty movie as it does to make a great movie. You got to have the people show up at the crack of dawn, you're running lines, or, you're running wires all over the place, you're having crew set up, you've got hair, you got makeup, you got people learning lines, you've got a director, you've got a camera operator. I mean, you're doing the same effort, but the difference is you have the chance to read the ahead of time. You should know whether I've got a good story. And I think sometimes they just go, this is going to be great. And they don't even think about it a second time. It just goes right out of their head and they just make it.
I don't think they sit down and go, this is going to be great.
I don't know, dude. I've run into people who are convinced like, oh, this is going to be so niche and so throwback and retro. We're going to do it look like this. And like, okay, that's cool for you, but do you have an audience bigger than just you?
Right. Well, and I think that some of this stuff, and I know we're off topic a little bit here, but I think there is a niche audience or else Amazon Prime wouldn't be buying these things.
I can tell you on the horror side or anything that's the gore or gross out, a lot of my friends that I know that are in the Atlanta film and video market, there are a lot of independent contractors. They'll go straight to video, straight to direct sales. They've got people who just want gore fest, blood fest, doesn't have to have. In fact, the crappier the acting, it's almost the more it will sell overseas. A lot of these things will get sold in European markets.
I just watched a movie called The Comeback Trail, and it's a pretty decent movie. It stars Zach Braff and Robert De Niro and Tommy Lee Jones.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
It kind of goes into this whole idea of how these shit movies get made. You should definitely check it out. They it's a little bit, I got some producers vibes to get back to the Gene Wilder topic.
Mm-hmm.
It did have some producers vibes where they're like, we're legitimately trying to make a shitty movie just for the money or to lose money. And it kind of tells a story of how they kind of redeem themselves. They get this amazing script and they get Tommy Lee Jones, who had been retired from acting, and they give him like a comeback movie eventually. Spoiler alert.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the name of the movie, The Comeback Trail.
Right.
So, but these two guys played by Robert De Niro and Zach Braff are just these sleazy, like they're producing like these B movies with like sexy nuns and stuff at the beginning of the movie. So I definitely recommend to check it out if you just want to see kind of how these movies are getting made in the first place.
Yeah. Well, we're kind of almost caught up to where we are, which is what we do, and we're getting to that point where we're going to move on to our movie review. Jeff, Radio Labyrinth has been around for 6 years now, getting ready, almost coming up on its 7-year anniversary or start of its 7th season. I guess it will complete its 6th year at the December of this year. What do you and Tim and now Stephanie and I guess Dustin Lawler, what do you guys see as the next evolution in the next few years for where is Radio Labyrinth going?
Good question. This pandemic has been rough on us doing the show from home. You know, we used to do it from Tim's studio at the radio station. And I think I'd like to get us back in the studio whenever that's possible. And maybe there'll be like a little bit of a rebirth of the show at that point, or maybe some kind of reboot eventually.
Our show, I mean, we had to change our format and everything because all the guests we had scheduled to come in, we couldn't have them come in. We started doing everything different, and then just everything went finort on us. Zoom's been sort of the next standard, but you're right. There is something that's nice about being in the same room that you're having these conversations.
And so much of our show now is kind of geared towards YouTube. Like we're doing 2 episodes a week. So just so we can create more YouTube content, which hopefully eventually that'll start generating some revenue. But the thing of it is you got to have so much content before it starts generating revenue. Mm-hmm. So the idea is to try and do 2 episodes a week and get as much content as we can for the YouTube algorithms and all that. So it'll be interesting to see if we can keep doing the YouTube stuff in the studio if we do go back to the studio anytime soon. But I'd like to do that.
Well, Walt, I've just got a great idea. We need a YouTube channel. Walt reacts to the shitty movie he has to watch.
People would watch it and literally it drives people to the audio version of the show too. And
you think I'm kidding, Walt? I'm suddenly thinking, we watched a guy, a music composer who we had a few weeks back, who had maybe a few hundred followers, just decided to review an Iron Maiden, and now he's got 78,000 followers because he puts out a music reaction video discussing the keys and the harmonic changes and the lyrics of Iron Maiden and other metal songs.
Yeah, we could have old man reacts to shitty movies.
These reaction videos are huge. I'm telling you,
huge.
They are.
They're huge.
I've gotten into them, and there's a couple of channels I watch religiously when a new episode drops. I'm subscribed. I get the little ding that reminds me, and I go back and I'll spend an entire evening rather than watching streaming television and take a chance on something. I'm like, at least I know I'm going to like the content because I do. I've kind of fallen for some of these people who I know they're watching a movie for the first time. Like I watched this. One of the ones I like to watch is a girl by the name of Cassie. Hers is called Popcorn in Bed. And she had her sister come and join her to watch Jaws for the first time, a movie that I could write the script today if they needed to rewrite. And so it's weird, but for me, since it's a reaction video, I get to vicariously remember what it was like seeing it for the first time because you're watching it through somebody's eyes who's watching it literally for the first time.
Exactly. And you get Walt up there, he'll get millions of subscribers.
I think so.
Go viral.
Yeah, Walt's going to end up monetizing his video portion of the show.
That's exactly what I need.
Well, you could do. You know what? You're almost there. You're going to watch the movie anyway. You just set up a camera and you just make comments out loud as you're watching it and learn how to embed the video you're watching and then learn how to video edit. Wait, that's Walt. Hold on. All right, never mind.
It might have to be a live take.
Or we find somebody. Well, you got to edit. Otherwise, YouTube will say copyright infringement for using too much of the intellectual property.
Yeah.
But you know what a lot of these folks are doing? They're putting all of it live, the whole thing, real time on Patreon, which allows all of that because it's behind a paywall. But then they're making the edited, shortened version for the regular listener and gaining monetization on YouTube.
Well, and what'll be great is when I react by getting up and going and do dishes or going to get another gummy, or I just have to pause it because it's so crappy and leave for a few minutes.
Well, with your disposition, we could actually, buy like really old cabinet TVs that people don't know that you're not really what you're watching. And then every now and then you can get a shotgun out and shoot the screen, or you get a baseball bat, start beating on it. And people are like, oh my God, this old dude is like going nuts on this movie. I'm serious.
I think we're onto something here, and I could have a different guest every week. So Jeff could come on one week, you could come on another.
Yeah,
and
yeah. Well, since we're on to shitty movies and movies that you are forced to watch, but don't forget, you give our listeners group and the Facebook listeners group, you give them the selection of 3 different movie titles. They pick it for you, but you give them the 3 to choose from. What movie do we get this week for a segment we like to call?
Well, this week, I told y'all I was going to try to avoid the whole shark genre. It cannot be avoided. And our listeners voted for Planet of the Sharks.
Yay!
The 2016 straight to, I assume it went straight to videotape. And Amazon Prime snatched it right up. I'm trying to keep track of how bad the worst ratings are. On IMDb, this one gets a solid 2.6 with over 1,300 people voting.
That, I think, is now the new low.
I think the worst we had was like a 3.2.
Right.
So a solid 2.6. And let me tell you, they earned it. Here's the IMDb write up on this thing. And this movie just pisses me off, and I'll tell you why in a second. But I think you'll be able to guess in just a second. And damn it, I'm not going to be able to contain myself. In the near future, glacial melting has covered 98% of Earth's landmass. Sharks have flourished and now dominate the planet, operating as one massive school led by a mutated alpha shark. Does this remind you of any other stupid, worthless piece of shit that came out of Hollywood a few years ago? Waterworld. This is a ripoff of Waterworld. And here's the part that really pisses me off. So the opening scene, the camera or whatever is going through the water, and you see the Statue of Liberty underwater. And it's obviously a ripoff of the freaking scene from the Planet of the Apes, which is a great movie. And this movie's a piece of shit. And they shouldn't have done that. And it pisses me off that in the first 30 seconds, that's what happens. So
if the line get your damn fins off me, you damn shark isn't the movie, just shut it off.
It should have been, because it would have been the best dialogue in the whole damn thing. This movie is so terrible. And that is pretty much what the movie is, but they keep talking about like, oh, we're way out at sea and it's so deep here, and you can see waves crashing over the sandbar that's right behind the actors. The CGI is absolutely horrible. And every set looks like Waterworld. And I hate that movie so freaking much that to have to be reminded of it over and over and over again for a total of, I think it was 93 minutes. It was just god awful. I mean, I don't even know where to start. Okay, so they filmed this thing. It's 86 minutes, by the way, and filmed, thankfully, in color, just in case you're wondering. But again, I'm reaching for anything good here.
Did they have jet skis like in Waterworld?
No, they did not have. Well, they had like one or two jet skis. They had a really, really nice boat that obviously had just been rented for the day, because I don't think they had any more than one day of shooting on that. They had a propellered kind of airlight type airplane, and I think that was a ripoff from Mad Max.
Oh yeah, the gyrocopter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like everything in here is a ripoff. They would probably call it an homage. I'm calling it a ripoff because everything in here is garbage and just is stupid and worthless.
Hey, it's like Mad Max meets Waterworld meets Sharknado.
Yes. How can you lose? Well, you can lose because it sucks. So the person who wrote this movie also wrote Six-Headed Shark Attack, Empire of the Sharks, Jurassic School, which I guess I'll have to put in the in as a selection coming up here. This piece of garbage, Road Wars, Dragons of Camelot, all these great movies that we've all heard of. So, but here's the real scary thing. He has, I saw the number here. Hang on. He has 56 writing credits. So this is a person who is actually making their living writing things in Hollywood. And this is the best that he could come up with. So the acting is absolutely horrible. Everything is completely predictable. The sharks are really lame. It looks like cartoon sharks. It's
Jabberjaw.
And there are, let's see, 5 actors out of the 35 that have their pictures on IMDb, and they're probably paying for it themselves. Their agent is not paying for it. But the guy who's the lead actor in this was in Asylum, District 9. He's actually been in some real actual things. He was in the Scorpion King, Book of Souls. He has done some actual legitimate real acting. But I think that he got into this one and just kind of gave up, realizing how crappy it was, and was just trying to get it done and get it out.
Gotcha.
In probably the 4 days of production they actually
Sometimes to get some of these movies, like to be in The Mummy or whatever, you have to say, all right, I'll do your Planet of the Sharks movie if you let me in this other movie.
Yeah, I guess so. It was probably some deal like that. You're right.
I've asked that question before, and I wonder where we could go for the behind the scenes. You wonder, especially when you have maybe a known actor, and you say, how would you not know to not be in this? And then you wonder if they said, well, my nephew's right out of film school. He's got this project. We'd love to cast you in this other movie, but we need you to do us a favor first, Yeah. And I wonder how many of those deals are behind the scenes like that.
Well, and the scary thing about this one is the main production company is the Sci-Fi Network. So I'm sure they had a little bit of money to throw around, and people were like, hey, Sci-Fi Network, this is going to get some TV airtime, so I'm willing to do it. But it's not great. It's worse than Ice Twister, definitely worse than Lamageddon. It's down there.
Now, your worst up until this moment has been Meowie Halloween.
It's better than Meowie Halloween.
Okay, so that's still your rock bottom.
That and Space Trucker Bruce are basically right there together at the bottom. This just barely edges it out, and I'm not really sure why.
There's water. It's peaceful. It's calming.
Not for me. Not when every homage is to Waterworld, piece of shit. And I know that somebody out there is going to be like, how can you not like Waterworld? Because Waterworld sucks. Because it's terrible. It's a piece of garbage. Sorry.
Based on your reactions, I am sure that within 2 years we'll get a Beneath the Planet of the Sharks.
Return to Beneath the Planet of the Sharks.
You should mention that, Jeff. There is a Planet of the Sharks too.
Wow. Well,
the crazy thing is, at the end of this, it's really conclusive. There's really no room for a Planet of the Sharks 2, but they've got a Planet of the Sharks 2. So
I guess that means they made enough to cover their costs and make another one.
I guess so, or they had money to burn and needed a tax break or something. But yeah, the Planet of the Sharks. I would not recommend it unless your two options are this or Space Trucker Bruce. Then go with Planet of the Sharks, or Waterworld. Flip a coin. If your choices are Planet of the Sharks and Waterworld, flip a coin. But I'm not a fan of Waterworld, by the way. I don't know if I've mentioned that.
I smell a write-in campaign for Waterworld.
Yes, make him watch it again. The movie that split up Kevin Reynolds and Kevin Costner. I'm never working with you again.
Yeah, no, I don't blame him. That was bad. So, but overall, it sucks, and I'm really working hard to come up with something good about it.
You don't have to drag this out.
But it's terrible. Don't see it, and write down the names of all the actors in it, and don't go see anything else they're in.
Do a soft boycott just on principle.
Just on principle, yes. This was intellectually insulting, really. So, and really, it even made Ice Sharks look better. So,
well, there you go. See, you can always set
there
the
was
bar
something
lower.
redeeming. I was trying to find something redeeming. Made Ice Sharks look better,
folks. If you want to participate in the weekly vote, you need to go out to our Facebook page. It's facebook.com/The Wilder Ride. Then click the join group button. Answer a couple of quick questions. Make sure you're not a bot. And then watch every week. Walt posts 3 selections and goes based on your vote on what he's going to watch. All right, let's go ahead and move to our news segment. And you know these are all true because we found them online. It's a segment we like to call...
It's no bullshit.
Walt, I always give you the chance to go first to try to redeem, kind of, it's like rinsing the taste out of your mouth from the movie review. I was about to say,
it's like cleansing the palate. Well, actually, I'm starting with some sad news, Alan.
Uh-oh.
From the Free Press of South Central Minnesota, Janesville, Minnesota, arson kills Frankenstein monster.
What?
A neighbor reportedly set fire to Frankenstein's monster. Luke Dwayne Olson, 35.
Was he a blind monk who was trying to serve soup?
Unfortunately, I think he was. I'm back. I was gonna make espresso. Luke Dwayne Olson, 35 of Janesville, is accused of burning down the 20-foot tall statue of the Green character that towered over the corner of South Main and West Mill Street in Janesville. Olson was charged with felony counts of arson and damage to property Monday in Waseca County District Court. Police officers found the statue engulfed in flames around 2 a.m. Saturday. Only the metal frame remains after firefighters extinguished the fire. The arson was caught on surveillance cameras, according to court complaints. Investigators reviewed footage and saw a man with a gas can approach the statue. The man lit a fire, but it went out as soon as the man walked away. The man came back a few minutes later and lit a second fire that destroyed the statue. Investigators suspect Olson, who has an appearance similar to the man in the video and lives in the area. Olson's wallet was also found on the ground in the area.
That might do it. Yeah, that might do it.
A search of Olson's property reportedly found clothing that appeared to match those worn by the arsonist in the video, including shoes that smelled of gasoline.
Oops.
However, Olson, the genius that he is, denied starting the fire.
I do believe he was quoted as saying, "Little boys isn't supposed to play with fire."
Frankenstein's monster came to Janesville in 2012. He stood at 2 Halloween attractions in the Twin Cities before he came to Janesville. His estimated value was $14,000.
It's no bullshit.
Well, it's a felony.
Yep. So I don't know what this guy had against Frankenstein or the statue or whatever, but there you go. Mr. Olson wins the Jackass of the Week award for burning down Frankenstein.
And everyone knows you need to use torches. You don't use a can of gasoline.
Exactly.
Right. Wouldn't it have just been easier to hook up some speakers and just play music, let them draw them away? I mean, it worked in the other movie.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I've got one, and I'm just beside myself. I think the answer comes embedded in the story. The headline: How many times can you fall into a storm drain?
I think that would be extraordinarily dangerous.
A woman was found and rescued from a storm drain in South Florida, has now been rescued from a storm drain in Texas. It kind of makes you wonder what's going on. A woman who spent 3 weeks in a sewer system in Delray Beach disappeared into a storm drain in Texas. Lindsay Kennedy, age 43, was posted on the Grand Prairie Facebook page. The post said they were looking for her. 4 days later, the woman was found by her mom and best friend at a nearby canal. Kennedy told police in March that she went for a swim in the canal near the boyfriend's house, and she was curious, and she wandered through the tunnels before getting lost. This is where I think the answer comes from. Kennedy's family said that a little over a week after checking into a rehab facility in Texas, she wandered off and was reported missing by a local report. Her family used a tracking app to find her phone, and they were able to ping her last location. They entered the underground system, and began their search and finally found her.
It's no bullshit.
She's got a thing for underground sewers and labyrinths.
If you will.
She heard they all float down there.
You'll float down there. We'll float down there. Yes, we do.
Come on down. We all float. Yeah, there's a double meaning in that.
Yes, there is. All right. Well, this one won't strike fear into anybody's heart. The U.S. military is stumped by a stolen box of armor-piercing grenades.
Do you mind telling me what this is all about, mister?
I heard this story on the news.
Yes, this is from NPR. We're all going to sleep better after hearing this one.
Armor-piercing grenades. Grenade!
Well, and there's so many leads on this one, but I guess that was the best one. The green metal box was stuffed inside a bright pink pillowcase and stashed in the bushes behind Christopher Zachary's house. He hauled it out for a better look. Stenciled on the box, cartridge for weapons. Inside were 30 armor-piercing grenades. I was scared, said Zachary, who runs a construction company, and confused. How did these high-powered explosives end up in his Southwest Atlanta backyard? Where did they come from? Investigators determined the grenades were last seen 8 months prior on an ammunition train that rolled out of Florida. Someone had stolen them somewhere on the rails to Pennsylvania. Another example in an Associated Press investigation that shows that how the military's vast supply chain is susceptible to theft. Marines called the squat 40 millimeter rounds that appeared in Zachary's yard on that Sunday morning on February 2018, 40 mics. They're linked together to feed the MK-19 grenade launcher. The rounds can penetrate 3 inches of steel and have a kill radius of nearly 50 feet.
Holy crap.
Holy cow.
The canister began its journey at Blunt Island, a U.S. Marine depot in Jacksonville, Florida. 6 flatbed rail cars hauled 18 large storage containers known as Connex boxes, each with an orange sign that says explosives on the side. So basically, here's the rundown. They don't know how this got stolen off the car that was labeled explosives in big letters because they didn't have the inspection tags on them. Apparently, there was no lock on the car. The car sat at the rail yard for 2 weeks, unguarded with no surveillance cameras, and the yard was unlocked.
It's no bullshit.
So that's our government for us, hauling around boxes of armor-piercing explosives in rail cars marked explosives with no security on them.
I mean, think about this. Somebody was tired of hauling off their stash and just left a box in someone's backyard to find. I mean, how much did they get away with?
Yeah, well, the scary thing that it ends with is the canisters are packed with 32 rounds. There were only 30 rounds in that box when Mr. Zachary found them. So
they took two out of that box.
Explosives remain missing.
Wow. Yeah. I like the genius of putting on an unsecure rail car explosives. Why don't you just put do not steal?
And if you've ever been around a rail yard, there's a lot of coming and going from the rail yard. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure somebody just popped it, grabbed it, took it with them, realized what they had, and left it in Mr. Zachary's yard.
Wow. All right, well, I've got the last news story, and this one, Walt, this one might be somebody that you might eventually run into in terms of, or a similar story with your job as a detective. Claudia Carrion from Allentown, Pennsylvania, has been arrested for criminal solicitation. She's been charged with attempting to hire an undercover detective to take out her husband. Now, we hear about these stories all the time about people who are trying to hire a hitman, try to take somebody out that you don't like, you feel jilted, or maybe you feel abused, and you think this is the right way to do it. Here's the problem. When Carrion offered to pay the pretend assassin $4,000 for the job, she then admitted, I actually don't have all $4,000.
Oh,
do you take credit cards or can I get a payment plan?
I'm sorry. That's retainer only.
Apparently, the investigator who was trying to at least get the evidence to transact to be able to arrest her negotiated back and forth and said, well, if you give me at least $100 now and agree to $100 a week, we can make this happen. So Carrion agreed to put $100 down and would pay the remaining $3,900 over the next 39 months as layaway installments for the death of her husband.
You have to be kidding.
Nope, not kidding.
Oh my gosh.
As soon as Carrion handed the $100 over to the undercover operative, she was handcuffed and taken away. Now, the story does thicken a little bit, or the plot thickens a little bit. After they arrested her, the cops learned that she supposedly tried getting him killed before, and once again, didn't have the money. So this is the second time, apparently, she's tried to have her husband killed. But her son, who was interviewed, said, she's got to be being framed because my mom and dad love each other. They've never hurt each other. Nothing's ever happened between the two of them. It's got to be somebody is framing her, trying to make her do something she doesn't want to do.
It has to be.
And that's where the story ends. For Carrion's sake, it says, we hope it turns out someone is trying to frame her. Otherwise, she's in some pretty deep trouble.
It's amazing. It's astounding. But it's no bullshit.
Well, when you work out a payment plan to get your husband whacked, I'm kind of thinking, things ain't going so hot.
I want to think about, how industrious, what is the gig economy created when somebody's like, hey, look, we understand a lot of people want to get whacked, okay? We understand you don't have all the money up front. You go with us. We got creditors. We've got ways of hooking you up. 30 days, same as cash. Maybe we'll get you set up on a 90-day finance plan. I mean, you can see the commercials, late night TV.
Well, and do you really want to be in hock to the guy who murdered your husband?
Yeah, you better not miss those payments.
Yeah, no, they're not going to be. They're not going to make a reminder phone call.
You get a little debit card says, Killers Are Us or Whack a Dude.
If you could just Venmo that to me, what emoji would you use for why you're sending that money?
I'm just going to leave that field blank. All right. Well, let's move on to our final segment. We've finished the news. Let's get on to our entertainment segment. And this is where we like to go through what we've been watching, what we've been reading, and what we've been listening to. And our guest, Jeff, has been hanging out with us. And he's going to actually plug a lot of this because, you know what? He's already got his show prep done. He's got a show coming up as well for Radio Labyrinth. And he's always ready to talk about what he's been watching, reading, or listening to. But since we don't want to put him on the spot, we're going to go to Walt first. Walt, let's do watching. What have you been watching this past week?
Well, I got down a little bit of a rabbit hole on Netflix, and it's a pretty awesome rabbit hole. Last week I mentioned that I was watching the World War II. I think it was the biggest moments of World War II in color.
In color, yes.
And then I got down the rabbit hole of other World War II in color documentaries, including one called World War II in Color. And it's really fantastic. They did a great job of restoring a lot of the footage. The storytelling, as far as talking about like the war in the Pacific and Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There's an episode on Midway. Really a fantastic job. And, I know for, looking at my kids' history books, they just don't cover World War II like they need to.
Yeah.
And so I would encourage anybody who has an interest in history or wants to brush up on history, take the time to go watch those documentaries. Some of it is horrifying. The ones on the concentration camps are, I got choked up, and you know me, I don't get choked up over much. But it was really hard to watch and hard to stomach, but it's a good reminder of what we need to avoid at all costs as time moves forward. The second one, I noticed they have one of my favorite movies on Netflix this month. That is The Naked Gun. If you have never seen The Naked Gun, you have to see it. It is a amazing movie. It may not be your kind of humor, but it is a comedy classic. Leslie Nielsen is just amazing. So check that out. And then another film classic, different genre, but The Outlaw Josie Wales with Clint Eastwood is also on Netflix this month. So you owe it to yourself if you've never seen that or haven't watched it recently. That is a Western classic, and it's Clint Eastwood at his best. So check that out when you get a chance.
Great movie. I think, is that the first time he directed as well? I think.
Ooh, I believe so. Yeah, I think it was.
If it's not the first, it's one of his early acting and directing, and he's been known to be very efficient in his filming, not wasting a lot of takes, getting them done in, out, and on time, always on budget, and yet always, for the most part, except for a couple of duds, always really good at the box office.
Well, and even those duds, people will talk about how great they are.
Mm-hmm.
So he is probably one of the most prolific and storytellers in our generation.
Absolutely. Anything else you've been watching?
Oh, I've been watching a ton of stuff, but those are the big ones.
All right. Jeff, let's go to you for picks and things that either for or against. It doesn't have to be just things you like. Just what have you been watching and do you recommend it?
Let's see. I guess my biggest recommendation would be the History Channel series Alone. I don't know if you guys have talked about that at all.
Not at all.
They take these 10 survivalists and they drop them different places in the world. Usually it's like Vancouver Island, and they drop them like 10 miles apart, and they're literally alone. It's like one of these kind of Naked and Afraid kind of shows, but these are real hardcore survivalists, like bushcraft people, and they're literally alone. There's no camera crew. They are their own camera crew, and they're dropped, and whoever lasts the longest wins the money.
Wow.
That's the whole premise of the series.
Really?
Yeah. There's 8 seasons. The 8th season just started. There's 2 episodes out of season 8, but you don't have to have seen the other seasons because there's not like a narrative that runs through the entire thing. And the first 7 seasons are all on Netflix now.
Wow. See, I was never a big reality TV person, but I always get hooked into watching videos of people who show you how easy it is to make a brick lean-to and build like a bamboo, palace. And let me show you how to do all this. And it makes it look like they do it in a couple of days. I'm like, holy crap.
These are fantastic for that. And the spoiler alert, winner of season 1 was from Georgia.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I like that.
And this most recent season, there's a contestant from Wellsboro, Pennsylvania, which is the town where our friend showed up with the weed from the radio station. He was from Wellsboro.
So there's a tie-in.
12 miles away from Mansfield.
You've got all kinds of connections to the show.
Yeah, and I have 30 mutual Facebook friends with this person, so I'm trying to get to her to get her on our show.
Cool.
But yeah, I would definitely recommend that show. I've been talking about that since the very beginning of Radio Labyrinth. It started around the same time we did. It's a great show. Tim finally started watching it this like last week, and he's on season 5 already.
Oh, he's binging hard watching that little baby. Yeah. That's awesome. All right, what else do you got, Jeff? Because I know you are like the go-to person. You try everything.
I think the best thing I watched this week was WWE's Most Wanted on A&E. They did a 2-hour episode about Andre the Giant memorabilia.
Ooh.
And I'm not a huge wrestling guy, but this A&E lately has been doing these great wrestling documentaries.
Oh yeah.
And this WWE's Most Wanted, I've only watched one of these, and it was the Andre the Giant one. They go around and look for his memorabilia, like the mask that he wore when he came back to the World Wrestling.
Oh yeah.
After being away for a couple of years, he had to wear a mask, so you wouldn't know it was Andre the Giant.
Right. You wouldn't know it was Andre the Giant.
Exactly.
Right.
Could have been his missing twin.
They interview and they have like the big show going around to these various wrestling collectors' houses and looking at their Andre the Giant, memorabilia that they have and trying to say, hey, can you sell this to us? But I guess the WWE doesn't want to spend a lot of money on it because they don't end up buying the things from the people, but they do end up finding the things that they're looking for eventually.
Wow.
And it was really good because you saw a bunch of never before seen or not seen in forever footage of Andre the Giant. And I'm a big fan of his, from the wrestling and from
he was great.
Yeah.
Well, you guys have been mentioning that show on your podcast for a while, talking about each week or whenever the new episode's spotlighting on a new classic WWE wrestler. And I never got into wrestling, but I did recognize some of the names. And I thought it might be worth, I think the documentaries, if they're done well, you don't have to have been a fan of the sport to enjoy the story of the person.
Right. And I was never a huge wrestling fan. And there's been maybe 5 or 6 of these A&E biographies on these wrestlers. And, I know who they are, but I'm not a big fan of them. But I've enjoyed that they're doing an amazing job on these biographies.
They are really good.
The stories are really sad and tugging at the heartstrings.
Yeah.
A lot of these people have had hard lives.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of them are inspirational and heartwarming.
Yeah. And some of these guys really wreck their bodies with, serious hardcore drugs, but then also all the steroids that they use to stay in shape. And I mean,
just like any athlete, just injuries for what they do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why a lot of these guys are dying off young too, because of all the abuse that they've put their bodies through and the drugs that they took to make, handle the pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a former wrestler that I'm trying to get to come on. And he's just kind of balked a little bit at it, but I think some of it is because of some of the tragic stuff that he's seen around the sport.
It's tough. I think when you are at the top of your game and everyone's coming at you saying, you got to perform, we're getting the ratings, you start doing whatever it takes just to get back in the ring and fight another bout. No matter how scripted, you're still going through the quote stunt work and you're still getting hurt in the practice. I know a lot of guys get hurt just practicing for the next fight, and they're out and they have to write new storylines. And I mean, it's a true sport in the sense they're using their bodies and they're trying to do things that are really cool for the fans, but they get hurt.
Yeah, it's very athletic, but man, it is abusive.
I've heard you guys talk about it so much, and I have yet to go to the A&E channel. I got to figure out where I can get it because we're not paying for like Hulu or YouTube TV. We're only just doing regular streaming services, so I don't know if I can find it on somewhere out there. But I would love to see some of these that you guys have been talking about on your show.
I'll look into that and let you know if they're streaming anywhere.
Okay, awesome.
I know A&E has their own app and stuff that they're trying to make people pay to use.
Isn't everybody doing that now? Yeah. So what else you got that you would want to recommend, or maybe steer people away from?
I try not to watch stuff that I would steer people away from. Jeremy Clarkson's got a new show on Amazon called Clarkson's Farm, where he, the guy from Top Gear, I guess he bought a farm with all of his Top Gear money.
Uh-huh.
And he's never actually lived there or tried to farm before. He was always, I guess he had a guy that he paid to just keep track of the land and watch everything. But he decided, I guess during the pandemic, that this would be the year that he's going to start farming.
Mm-hmm.
So they made a documentary about this, and I watched the first episode, and I think I'm going to stick with it. It's been pretty good. He's an interesting character, that Jeremy Clarkson.
Mm-hmm. So I imagine it's a little self-deprecating, and we're going to find it's not as easy being a farmer as you might think.
Right. And he does crazy things, like he goes out on the first day and buys a Lamborghini tractor. Like, who knew Lamborghini even made a tractor?
I had no idea. A name brand.
He goes around and looks at all these secondhand tractors that are like what you would expect in the English countryside. These 50-year-old tractors are all rusted and everything. And he's like, I decided not to buy any of those. And then they show him the next scene with this probably $500,000 or $1 million Lamborghini huge tractor.
That's hysterical. Yeah, I had no idea Lamborghini would be actually into heavy farm equipment.
They make it, apparently.
All right, anything else you got, Jeff, for the audience?
No, that's all I got for now.
Okay. Well, I finally got my father-in-law to bite on trying the trilogy, starting with the first movie, and what is my all-time favorite film. We watched The Fellowship of the Ring. He managed to make it the first 3 hours because we're watching the extended edition, and got a phone call. And I don't know if I had this feeling that, did he like text a buddy of his that I didn't see that said, please call me, get me out of this? Because all of a sudden I hear, oh, it's Larry. I got to go find out what's going on back home. And he goes upstairs and he talks on the phone for like, so how's the weather? And has it been raining a whole lot? I'm like, oh yeah, that's a good reason to walk away from the movie. But I guess he found out that I was like, oh. So he said the next day, he's like, are we going to watch the rest? I'm like, well, I mean, if you didn't want to, he goes, no, I want to see what happens. I think I realized, though, part of the problem, I'm going to turn closed captioning on for him because he has a little hard of hearing, and so many scenes in the dialogue, they're whispering or they're talking softly, and I think he was missing on what was happening in the story. And so he has never seen it before, has never read it before. And so, but he did say at the end of the first one, he said, okay, I kind of want to see the second one now. So he may like, I think he liked when the action finally picked up and all the orcs were showing up. So I'm going to show him the Two Towers next and see if we can make it all the way through the trilogy before he has to leave.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You subjected him to 3 hours.
3 hours and 48 minutes of movie one of the greatest movie of all time. Walt, over the last season, you've watched more hours of stuff that you have gone on a profanity-laden review. I don't want to hear it.
Well, I guess I do not have the moral high ground on that one. You're correct.
And turning on the captions is a good idea. I do that a lot on like some of these English shows where I have a hard time they're speaking English, but it's just hard to understand them sometimes.
Yeah, the dialect can get, especially on some of the more regional areas, it can be very hard if you don't have an ear for it. The only other movie I watched this week, it's been busy, but we did decide, because we had watched Raiders of the Lost Ark a couple weeks ago, we skipped over Temple of Doom and went straight to The Last Crusade. And I made a comment about this on our friends at the Indiana Jones Minute. Now that they're back to, after their year-long hiatus, going back to reviewing Crystal Skull 1 minute at a time. I said, Last Crusade was always the second best film, but it was always still a very distant second to Raiders. And then after my dad passed away, I made a point of going back and rewatching the Raiders trilogy. And when I got to Last Crusade and watched the father-son dynamic from a completely different perspective now, having lost my dad, it became much more engrossing in the emotional level of the relationship of father and son. And it was really cool to be able to now have my father-in-law visiting, watching it with him, enjoying it together, since I can't watch it with my dad anymore, but I get to watch it with my father-in-law. And it was really, it was a fun watch.
Yeah, I bet.
There's still some significant issues with a couple of places, but for the most part, really enjoyed it.
Well, and still one of the better movies. If you're going to sit down and watch a movie, there's a lot of action in it. I mean, it's a great movie. It's fun to watch. It
is fun. And as long as you don't slow it down and look at it 1 minute at a time, you don't see all the errors.
Right. I think that's the hard thing. Yes.
So that's it. That's all I've been watching. I haven't had a chance. I'd already, as I mentioned before, and for Jeff's benefit, we finished up Invincible. I finished up The Mayor of Easttown. Two things I will say, looking back, highly recommend. Although Invincible, I've still got a big burning question that I was kind of pissed off they didn't answer in the first season, so we'll have to see what happens in season 2. Let's move on then to what, if anything, we're reading. Walt.
I think I've talked about everything that I'm reading over the last couple of weeks. I just need to get caught up on stuff. Just haven't had a whole lot of time. So you can go back and listen to the last couple of weeks episodes for my What Are You Reading segment.
Okay. Jeff, I don't know if you guys do a reading segment, but are you into anything, any comics or books or anything?
I've listened twice to the audiobook of Project Hail Mary, which is the third novel from Andy Weir, the author of The Martian. You see the movie The Martian?
Oh, yeah.
With Matt Damon.
Yeah. He's written 3 books, and I guess he's written a few other things, maybe novellas and short stories and stuff. But The Martian was his big hit. And then he wrote a second book that wasn't as good. It was set on the moon, I think. But then this third book, Project Hail Mary, is fantastic.
Okay.
I recommend it highly enough. And the audiobook is amazing. It's read by Ray Porter, and there are different accents that he does, different characters, different countries, and different species, I'll say. I don't want to give any spoilers, but this guy does amazing work. And if you read the book, one of the characters in the book, when you read it in the book, the dialogue is written in musical notes in the book, and the way they perform it in the audiobook, they actually play the musical notes underneath the dialogue that he's doing. So as he talks, you hear a little underneath the voice.
Oh, very interesting.
The dialogue. Yeah, it's fantastic.
It's almost like taking a page out of Close Encounters, where music becomes the way that particular race interacts with humanity.
Right. It's cool. Fantastic. I can't recommend it highly enough. I've literally listened to it twice since it came out. It just came out about a month ago.
Wow. All right. I'm going to check that out. Project Hail Mary. I do like reading them, but and I'm with you, my wife is too. Whenever we have to do an audiobook, there's just something special when you get a really good performer who can do the different character voices, and then they do a little post-production or something to just really bring it alive. It's a lot different than just having the author dryly try to read it to you.
Right. And go ahead and read the book if you want. But when you're done, I think you're going to have enjoyed it so much that you're going to want to go back and give the audiobook a chance.
Excellent. Very good. All right. Anything else you're reading?
No, that's mine. That's my recommendation.
Okay. I'm reading a book that Walt mentioned last week, and I think the week before, and I'm reading it because he got a spare copy and gave it to me. So I've started to dive into the 50-year mission, the first 25 years. It's the complete, uncensored, unauthorized oral history of Star Trek.
Yeah, and it's great so far.
It's interesting. I love that it's unauthorized. There's a lot of people going, I can't guarantee that what you're saying is true, but wink, wink, it might be.
Yeah, right.
I'm not going on record saying that that's true, but yeah. And you see like nodding their head like, yeah, it's totally true. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, maybe it is, and maybe it is.
Yeah, I heard that story. Yeah, it really happened. But no, that's just all talk on the movie set. Oh, yeah, it really happened.
Yeah, I was not in the room, but I was right there when it happened.
I swear to God, don't know anything about it, but yeah, it did.
100%.
But yeah, thanks. It's interesting because I do have such a love of Star Trek. I think I don't know where you fall, Jeff, but I went back and watched all of the Next Generation since they were available to binge, and I've now gone back and I'm mostly through binging all of the classics, of which I've missed a couple. I didn't realize in rerun I've missed some, and just really love going back and having that option with streaming to be able to binge a show like that.
Yeah, particularly with season 3, there were a couple that I was like, I don't think I've ever seen this before. Like, I thought I'd watched every one of them, but season 3 that just didn't quite live up to the rest of the series, but they're worth watching.
And I even like the Star Trek Discovery, and I enjoyed Picard. I guess I'm in the minority on that, but I thought it was a great season, and I'm looking forward to more of it.
You know, I haven't given Picard a try, but I've always liked Patrick Stewart as an actor. He can take a movie that he's in that it's not a great movie, and you still kind of enjoy it because he's in it. And I wonder if that's part of what's the draw with Picard.
Yeah, and the cameos that pop up, you know, with Riker and Seven of Nine, and you know, I thought they handled it really well.
It's one of those things where I just didn't want to subscribe to yet another network to get to watch it. So we'll have to wait. At some point, you know, the reason we cut the cord, and I think we're all in the same boat all of a sudden, I started realizing I'm paying for all these channels I never watch, so I cut back and cut my cable and everything to like in half. And now I've added HBO Max. We've got Disney Plus. We started off with Netflix already. We had Amazon Prime. I feel like we're almost back to where we were.
But at least it's stuff you're watching.
I'm hoping that this deal that just went through with HBO Max and Discovery, they'll combine their two streaming services eventually. I hope.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
That would be nice. All right, let's get to our last segment, what we're listening to. This could be music, this could be podcasts, but what are you listening to? We'll go to Walt first.
All right, and so there are a couple of them that I want to mention that are coming out with new episodes this week. I had mentioned a few months ago a podcast called Gangster House. It's about one of the FBI's top 10 most wanted fugitives, a guy who was operating in the Atlanta area named Michael George Davis. Gangster House has just dropped a 10th episode, and I have not had a chance to listen to it, but I probably will tonight, and to check that out. And then the other one that I keep coming back to, Camp Hell Anawaki, that they're about to wrap their season up, so you definitely want to check that out. And then on a lighter note, check out Comedy Bang Bang. They continue to just release some great, hilarious episodes. It's a lot of improv. They kind of start with a general theme and go from there, but it is a hilarious show. There was also a show, I believe it was on Comedy Central, called Comedy Bang Bang, same host and everything, that ran for several years. That was amazing. You can catch that streaming sometimes, but their podcast is fantastic.
Excellent. All right, good stuff. And Jeff, we'll go to you next. What have you been listening to, or do you recommend for folks to try?
I'll recommend a new podcast that just started this week called Did You Get My Text?
Okay.
From Patton Oswalt and his wife, Meredith Salinger. And they basically live in the same house, and they're raising Patton's daughter. And I guess Patton Oswalt is kind of like a basement troll where he just likes hang out in the dark basement of his house while his wife is up, you know, doing everything around the house, and they spend the day texting each other. And so they decide to get together once a week and read through all these texts that they've sent to each other.
Oh, gosh.
And talk about all the stuff that, you know, that they didn't get to speak about in person. And the first episode's been pretty funny so far. It just came out this week. It's called Did You Get My Text?
That is such a great name for a podcast, because I swear to God, the second I put my phone down or put it in a charger or put it down on my desk and go do something, my wife comes in, did you get my text? Like, well, what if you're going to come down and get me anyway, why did you bother texting me? But yeah, that happens to me all the time.
Yeah, that's great. Patton Oswalt is one of my favorite comedians, and he's a great comic actor as well. So this should be fantastic. Jeff, have you watched AP Bio?
I have. I love it.
Yeah, and he really makes that show. He plays the principal on there,
Yep.
and he's awesome.
What else you been listening to, Jeff?
Uh,
Or recommend?
Radio Labyrinth, of
Radio
course.
Labyrinth should probably be in there.
Yes, absolutely.
I listen to a lot of these TV show rewatch podcasts, like The Office Ladies and The Fake Doctor's Real Friends, the Scrubs rewatch
Yeah,
podcast.
that's great.
The Office Deep Dive, hosted by Brian Baumgartner. That one's a good one. He was Kevin on The Office.
Yeah, his voice is so different from
Yeah, you wouldn't
the
know
character.
it was him. He's only done Kevin once on this whole podcast.
Really?
Yeah, there was that thing that Kevin said about why use so many words when so single word do just good, something like that. Somebody wrote in and said something like that to him, and he jumped into the Kevin character and did it. And his voice as Kevin is so different than his normal speaking.
So crazy. And he's from the Atlanta area.
Yeah,
Originally.
he's from Atlanta. Him and Ed Helms both went to school here.
Oh, I didn't realize Ed Helms was from here
Yeah.
too.
So those are mine.
Okay. For me, I'm going to do a throwback out to the show that my wife and I started. Ironically, you talked about Patton Oswalt. Obviously, he's already got a following, so they've got a lot more listens than we do, but we are growing our audience. We started the Marriage Fit podcast earlier this year, and we had to take a week off with all of the things we were doing. If you heard at the very beginning of the episode, we've been driving my father-in-law, who's been visiting us for the last several weeks, to and fro to the doctor. But we have got some episodes coming up. Next week, we'll get back on track. Our most recent one, we actually sat down with Dr. Viviana Coles, who has a television show where they basically decide when people have fallen in love at first sight, and it's like a reality show where they follow them and decide, you think you guys are going to get married just because you fell in love at first sight? Well, let's decide, do you really know what you're getting into? And she's the counselor. They've got a couple of other people that are one's a pastor, and one's maybe like a business person, and they basically make up a panel. But we had her on because she has a new book, The 4 Intimacy Styles, and it was kind of fun to get an author and an actual counselor who is a licensed sex therapist. And so that was our most recent episode. So we like to call that the sex episode, even though we didn't really talk a whole lot about it besides the need for it. And if you're finding out you guys don't have it anymore, maybe you want to listen and get some ideas on what you can do. Maybe go to her website, take the self-assessment, figure out what areas you're lacking in besides not getting any. So the Marriage Fit podcast, that is available and have been enjoying doing that. My big shout outs, we already had the Radio Labyrinth, but that's one we listen to every week. And then 60MW from our friends across the pond in the UK. I really enjoy. They do a culture-based podcast. They do video games as well, and that's a lot of fun for me, trying to stay on top of some of these games that I don't have time to play all of them. There was a point in my life where I would buy every game that came out. And then I had kids, and then the kids went to college and got involved in sports, and I realized all my money was already spent before I earned it. So, but yeah, really enjoy 60MW podcast. That's going to wrap up all of our listening. So before we let Jeff remind everybody where you can listen and give all the particulars, Walt, where can people learn a little bit more about our show? If this is the first time, maybe we've got some Radio Labyrinth listeners coming in trying to hear a little bit about Jeff, and they didn't know anything about us.
Sure. Well, you can find out all you want to know about us at facebook.com/The Wilder Ride. Hit the follow button, and then the button to join our listeners group is going to come up. And if you're a Radio Labyrinth listener, you're familiar with the listeners group. So we don't talk about politics or any of that kind of stuff. We just talk about the show and entertainment and stuff that's relevant to our topic at hand. So check that out. And then you can also check out our website, thewilderride.com. That has everything you could ever possibly want to know about us.
And as we always mentioned, whatever podcast you listen to, take a second to rate and review. But more importantly, if you've got the share function on your podcatcher, share it. Let everybody know what you've been listening to. Help everybody spread the word. Unlike radio, that everybody's worried about ratings and share, people in the podcasting world, they want everyone to listen to everyone. They all work well together, and that's why we have so much fun doing this. So Take a second and do that. Jeff, you're on Radio Labyrinth. You're getting ready to come down to the end of a season 6 at the end of this year, starting season 7. Tell us a little bit about where people can learn about you and Radio Labyrinth.
We're also on Facebook at just Radio Labyrinth, and we have a listeners group called the Radio Shack, the Radio Labyrinth Radio Shack, which is a fun group of our listeners. And we have a website, radiolabyrinthpodcast.com, and we're radio_labyrinth on Twitter and the Instagrams and all that.
Yeah, find them, like them, follow, do whatever social media platform you're on. Always a lot of fun. Plus, a lot of times, if they're doing something special, they just recently, now that as far as in Georgia where we all live, they were able to have a live listeners event for the first time. Give a shout out to Mike Hall at Euro Pizza up in Conyers. And that was cool. And if it hadn't been for a couple of things that popped up on my radar, I was planning to drive out there, so I will have to catch the next one. But it must have been a lot of fun to get back in front of your listeners and do a live show and just meet people live again.
It was. And we had gone out there once during the pandemic when they first opened back up, and everybody was wearing their masks and social distancing and just eating their pizza. This time, everybody had been vaccinated. We took the masks off, and a bunch of people showed up, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. The pictures that were shared on social media looked like you guys had a really good time. And I guess you just kind of have that moment where you're like, is this going to work? Is it? And they're like, it feels like back to normal.
And it was our last hurrah before Tim became a dad.
And fatherhood. Well, you guys are great. Thank you. You know what? If the folks don't know, these guys, in fact, Jeff stumbled across our podcast season 1 when we were breaking down Young Frankenstein 1 minute at a time. And those guys actually were on our show for a few of those minutes. And then they came back in our season 2 for Blazing Saddles. And this was the first time we were able to get Jeff on as a solo since we sort of shifted to the talk format. And I know, Jeff, you're waiting for us to get back to movie discussions. We're definitely going to be doing that. It's just sometimes life gets in the way and you only have so much bandwidth. But thank you for being an ardent supporter of our show. Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, you guys are the best.
Oh,
I'm going to make sure that our listeners go and make Walt watch Waterworld.
I'll tell you what, Jeff, I will put that up as an option this week. And if people want to torture me that way, I will question my existence as a human being. And
you know what I'm going to watch for? I'm going to watch for like 17 new members, and then it wins by 17 votes. I'm like, yes,
and that's exactly
those are all Radio Labyrinth listeners. All right. Jeff, thank you again so much. And folks, if you haven't checked out Radio Labyrinth, great cultural podcast from some Gen Xers. It is a not safe for work, but you know what? A lot of podcasts are. Even ours technically skirts that line. I just get creative with my sound effects because I'm a dad still, and I know my kids listen, and I'm just weird about it. But you guys take care. Jeff, thanks again for being on the show.
Oh, thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
Until next week, and we always tell you that there is another fun-filled guest coming your way next week. We actually have it used to be a husband and wife only, but then they had a child, and that child has joined their group. It's a new age group called 2002. I've mentioned them before. They will be joining us to talk about their multiple albums, their awards, their recognitions. If you're into, let's say, like Enya or Yanni or Ray Lynch or any of the new age, kind of sit back, relax, maybe turn the lights down. Some of it's more spacey, some of it's more fantasy, but it's all very new age, that style of music. They've been doing it for a while. They're called 2002. So we're going to be joined by Pamela and Randy Kopis and maybe even their daughter, Sarah. So come on back next week for another great episode of The Wilder Ride Listener's Lounge. Oh, Jeff, see, you made it all the way 2 hours, no problem. And you got to go to your next show.
Do 2 more.
Are you late for your show?
No, I got a few minutes, but I'm going to jump off real quick. But I did want to mention real quick that we're thinking about joining a new network. I'm trying to talk Tim into switching, and he was leaning heavily towards it before he had to stop for all the baby stuff.
Oh yeah,
damn fatherhood,
dang kids.
They ruin everything, as Tim's gonna find out. And I just want to be along for the ride and watch that.
When you hit the dance floor, you gotta be jumping jack.